Gold in the gutters. Why human waste was wealth in 1790s, Edinburgh. The richest men in Edinburgh worked knee-deep in human excrement. They emerged at midnight. They descended into darkness. And they built the foundations of the modern world on a substance so vile that polite society refused to acknowledge its existence. This is not a story about filth. This is a story about transformation. About an invisible economy that powered empires. About the men who touched what no one else would touch, and in doing so, became essential to the survival of civilization itself. You think you understand the past. You imagine cobblestones and candlelight, powdered wigs, and philosophical salons. But beneath all of that elegance, beneath the drawing rooms and the assembly halls, there was something else. Something festering. Something that, if left unattended for even a few weeks, would have brought the entire Scottish Enlightenment crashing down into a pit of its own making. Welcome to the world of the Nightmen. Let us establish, immediately, what we are dealing with. Edinburgh, in 1775, held approximately 70,000 souls within its ancient walls. London approached 700,000. And every single one of those human beings produced, on average, 2 pounds of solid waste per day. Every day. Without exception. Without pause. Without mercy. Due to the mathematics, Edinburgh alone generated 140,000 pounds of human excrement daily. Nearly 50 million pounds per year. And there was no sewer system, no treatment plant, no infrastructure whatsoever designed to move this material from where it was produced to anywhere else. Where did it go? For centuries, the answer was simple. It went into the streets. It went into the rivers. It went into shallow pits beneath the houses themselves. It accumulated. It festered. It bred disease. And eventually, it threatened to drown the very cities that produced it. By the middle of the 18th century, this was no longer a matter of discomfort. It was an existential crisis. The great urban centers of Britain were drowning in their own biological output. And the solution that emerged was not engineering. It was not technology. It was human beings willing to do what no one else would do. The Nightmen answered that call. To understand the magnitude of this crisis, you must first understand what Edinburgh believed itself to be. This was the Athens of the North. David Hume walked these streets. Adam Smith developed his theories of wealth in these coffee houses. The Scottish Enlightenment was reshaping human thought, challenging centuries of received wisdom, laying the intellectual groundwork for the modern world, and all of it sat atop a foundation of accumulating human waste. The old town of Edinburgh was a marvel of medieval engineering pushed far beyond its intended capacity. The great tenement buildings, some reaching 12 stories into the Scottish sky, housed families, stacked upon families, dozens of households, sharing a single structure. These buildings were called lands, and beneath each land was a pit, the cesspool. Imagine a chamber carved into the volcanic rock beneath the city. Imagine it receiving the waste of 50 families, 100 families, for months at a time. Imagine the pressure building, the gases accumulating, the liquids seeping into the groundwater that people drew from their wells. This was the reality beneath the philosophical discussion. This was the truth beneath the poetry and the portraiture. The most brilliant minds of the age lived above lakes of decomposing human waste, and someone had to empty those pits. Here is what the history books rarely tell you. The cities of the 18th century were connected not just by trade routes and postal services, but by something far more intimate. They were connected by waste. Every road leading out of Edinburgh carried night soil carts. Every river downstream from London received what the city expelled. Every farmer within 20 miles of a major urban center knew exactly when the Nightmen would arrive with their cargo. Because here is the transformation that made civilization possible. Human waste was not garbage. Human waste was gold. The same excrement that threatened to poison the city was, to a farmer, the most valuable substance on earth. Phosphorus, potassium, the holy trinity of agricultural fertility, concentrated and delivered in a form that plants could immediately absorb. A single cartload of night soil could transform a barren field into productive farmland. 10 cartloads could feed a village for a year. The entire agricultural surplus that fed the growing cities came, in no small part, from the cities themselves, from their bodies, from their waste. This was the circle of life that no one wanted to discuss. The food that entered the city left the city, and another form traveled to the countryside, and returned as food once more. And the men who made this transformation possible were among the most essential workers in the entire economy. They were also among the most despised. Would you descend into that darkness? Would you breathe that air? Would you do the work that made everything else possible? Close your eyes. No, keep them open. I want you to see this. It is 3 in the morning in Edinburgh, August of 1775. The summer heat has not yet broken, and the air is thick with moisture that seems to amplify every smell, every sound, every sensation. You are standing in the Cowgate, one of the main thoroughfares of the old town. Buildings rise on either side of you like canyon walls, blocking any breeze, trapping the air in a corridor of accumulated stench. The cobblestones beneath your feet are slick with substances you do not wish to identify. Above you, the windows are dark, but you know what lurks behind them. You know because the evidence is everywhere. Garde de l'eau. The cry comes from somewhere above. A warning. A courtesy, if you can call it that. You arrive from the French Garde de l'eau. Watch out for the water. Except it is not water that comes hurtling down from the upper stories. It is the contents of a chamber pot, flung from a window into the street below, where it will join the accumulated deposits of the day. If you are lucky, you hear the warning in time to press yourself against a wall. If you are unlucky, if you are drunk or distracted, or simply too slow, you receive the full blessing of your neighbors upon your head and shoulders. This is not occasional. This is constant. Every night, from every window, the accumulated waste of the day descends into the streets. By morning, the gutters run thick with it. By afternoon, the summer sun has baked it into a crust that crunches beneath the feet of pedestrians. And somewhere beneath your feet, in pits and chambers you cannot see, the cesspools are filling. The pressure is building. The gases are accumulating. Someone must empty those pits before they explode. The nightman's shift begins at 10 in the evening, when the last respectable citizens have retired to their beds and the streets belong to those who work in darkness. His equipment is simple. A lantern, because even the faintest light is precious in the absolute blackness of a cesspool. A rope, thick and strong, capable of bearing his weight plus the weight of a full bucket. The bucket itself, leather or wood, designed to be filled and raised and emptied hundreds of times per night. A hook, for breaking up the crusted surface of the pit. A shovel, for what the hook cannot reach. And a rag, soaked in vinegar, tied across his face in a futile attempt to filter the air he must breathe. The access point is usually a hatch in the floor of a basement or courtyard. The nightman prays it open, and the smell rises to meet him like a physical force, like a hand pushing against his chest, warning him to stay away. He descends anyway. The ladder is slick with condensation and worse. The walls of the pit are coated with a film that his lantern barely illuminates, and at the bottom, waiting for him, is the accumulated waste of human habitation. Solid, liquid, and everything in between. Decomposing, fermenting, generating gases that can kill a man in seconds if he breathes too deeply. He fills the bucket. He ties it to the rope. His partner, waiting above, hauls it up and empties it into the cart. The bucket descends. He fills it again. This continues for hours, for an entire night, sometimes for multiple nights, if the cesspool is large or the accumulation severe. By dawn, the cart is full. By dawn, the nightman has handled hundreds of pounds of human waste, with nothing between his hands, and the material but a thin layer of leather gloves that disintegrate within weeks. By dawn, he has earned more than most laborers make in a month. The nightmen did not understand microbiology. Germ theory would not be established for another century, but they understood something just as important. They understood that the pits could kill you. Not slowly, through disease, though that happened too. Quickly, violently, without warning. Meten, dead, Hudavis, Hudakonanan, Abal, dioxide. The gases of decomposition, trapped in the enclosed space of a cesspool, could reach concentrations lethal to human life. A nightman who descended too quickly, who did not allow the pit to ventilate, who took one breath too many at the bottom of the ladder, could collapse and die before his partner even knew something was wrong. And then the partner would descend to help, and he would die too. Entire crews were found at the bottom of cesspools, sprawled in the muck, killed by an enemy they could not see, could not smell until it was too late, could not fight with any weapon they possessed. They called it bad air. They called it miasma. They developed rituals and precautions based on experience rather than understanding. Lower a candle into the pit before descending. If the flame dies, the air will kill you. Wait. Ventilate. Try again. They did not know why this worked. They only knew that it did, most of the time. And when it did not work, when the ritual failed and a man died, they buried him and continued the work because the work had to be done. Because the alternative was worse. What would you do if your survival depended on descending into darkness, knowing that the darkness itself might kill you? Follow the night soil from the cesspool to the farm. This is where the alchemy happens. The full cart leaves Edinburgh before dawn, traveling south toward the Lothian farmlands. The Nightman does not make this journey. His work is done. The cart is now the responsibility of the carter. Another link in the chain, another worker in the invisible economy. Carter travels through the awakening countryside, passing farmers already at work in their fields. He knows his destination. Of a particular farm, a particular farmer who has contracted for this delivery, who will pay in cash or trade for the privilege of receiving Edinburgh's waste. The farmer is waiting. He has prepared a pit of his own, a composting area where the night soil will be mixed with straw and other organic matter, where it will be allowed to age and mellow and transform from toxic sludge into something approaching soil. The exchange is made. The carter receives his payment. He turns the empty cart back toward the city, where the process will begin again tomorrow night, and the farmer takes possession of his prize. This is not metaphor. This is not exaggeration. In the 18th century, night soil was genuinely valuable. Farmers bid for the right to receive it. They paid premiums for the waste of wealthy households, believing that a rich diet produced richer manure. They developed sophisticated techniques for processing and applying this material, techniques passed down through generations. The nitrogen in human waste could double or triple crop yields. The phosphorus strengthened roots and increased flowering. The organic matter improved soil structure, increased water retention, made marginal land productive, and productive land abundant. This was the engine of the agricultural revolution. Not just new techniques and new crops, though those mattered too, but the ability to concentrate fertility, to move it from where it was produced to where it was needed, to close the loop between consumption and production. The Nightmen were not just removing waste from the city, they were redistributing the nutrients that made urban life possible. They were the circulatory system of an organism that stretched from the tenements of Edinburgh to the fields of the Lothians and back again. But let us not romanticize this word. Let us not pretend that economic importance translated into social respect. The Nightmen lived apart. They had to. Their profession marked them as permanently unclean, contaminated by association with substances that polite society refused to acknowledge. They could not live in respectable neighborhoods. They could not drink in respectable taverns. Their children could not apprentice to respectable trade. They formed their own communities, their own neighborhoods, clustered near the depots where the carts were stored and the cesspools were emptied. Their own social networks, their own marriages, their own traditions. A Nightman's son became a Nightman. A Nightman's daughter married a Nightman. The profession was hereditary not by law, but by exclusion, by the walls that respectable society erected against anyone who did this work. And yet, they were essential, and yet the city could not function without them. And yet, every elegant dinner party, every philosophical salon, every act of civilization depended on their labor. This is the breaking of bonds that industrial society creates, the separation of work from dignity, the invisibility of essential labor, the comfortable illusion that our waste simply disappears, that someone else handles it, that we need not think about where it goes or who touches it. The Nightmen understood this hypocrisy better than anyone. They understood that the same hands that would not shake theirs in daylight depended on their work every night. They understood that the system that excluded them could not exist without them. Some of them grew wealthy. Night soil contracts were valuable, and a Nightman who owned his own cart, who controlled his own route, could earn a substantial income. But wealth could not buy respectability. Wealth could not erase the contamination that their profession imposed. They remained outsiders, necessary outsiders, the dirty secret that kept the clean world functioning. Every system creates its abuses. Every economy generates its exploitations. The night soil trade was no exception. Competition for contracts could turn violent. Routes were territories, defended with fists and worse. A nightman who encroached on another's territory might find his cart overturned, his horse lame, his crew beaten in a dark alley. The waste itself could be adulterated. Unscrupulous nightmen might mix their cargo with cheaper materials, diluting the valuable human waste with horse manure or street sweepings, delivering to farmers a product far less potent than promised. And the cesspools themselves could become weapons. A household that refused to pay could find their pit unattended, the pressure building, the stench increasing until they relented or faced consequences far worse than the original bill. There were also the dangers, the deaths, the men who descended into pits and never emerged. The explosions, rare but devastating, when methane accumulated to the point of ignition and a single spark from a lantern turned a cesspool into a bomb. These events were rarely recorded. A dead nightman was not newsworthy. An explosion in a basement merited perhaps a paragraph in the Weekly Gazette, attributed to some vague cause, quickly forgotten. But the nightmen remembered. They knew which pits had claimed lives. They knew which households were dangerous, which structures were unstable, which corners of the city to approach with extra caution. They passed this knowledge down, father to son, generation, an oral tradition of survival in a profession that could kill you without warning. By the 1780s, the chaos was giving way to regulation. Not because anyone cared about the nightman, but because the city itself was changing. Edinburgh was expanding beyond its medieval walls. New town was rising to the north, a planned development of wide streets and elegant squares, designed according to Enlightenment principles of order and symmetry. A new town would have proper sanitation, covered drains, scheduled collections, licensed contractors who met specific standards, who operated according to specific rules. The wild days of the cesspool economy were ending. The future belonged to systems, to bureaucracies, to regulated industries that left no room for independent operators, with their own carts and their own territories. Some nightmen adapted. They obtained licenses. They formed companies. They transformed themselves from outlaw contractors into respectable businessmen, their dark history buried beneath paperwork and professional associations. Others did not adapt. They continued working the old routes, the old pits, until the old system disappeared entirely and left them with nothing. This is the pattern of modernization. This is how the informal becomes formal, how the essential becomes regulated, how the invisible becomes visible, and in doing so loses something of its original character. The nightmen of 1775 were the last generation of their kind. Their children and grandchildren would work in a different industry, one with rules and schedules and safety standards, one that did not require them to descend into darkness alone, armed with nothing but a bucket and a vinegar-soaked rag. Progress, perhaps, but also loss. The loss of a world where essential work created essential workers, where doing the job no one else would do earned a certain rough respect, even if it could never earn full acceptance. Does this feel like ancient history to you? Or does it feel uncomfortably familiar? Do we not still depend on workers we refuse to see? On labor we refuse to acknowledge? On human beings who handle what we will not touch? The waste-to-wealth economy of the 18th century did not last. It could not last. The scale of urbanization that followed, the millions upon millions who would crowd into industrial cities, demanded solutions beyond human muscle and wooden carts. The sewers came. The treatment plants came. The entire infrastructure of modern sanitation that allows cities of tens of millions to exist without drowning in their own waste. But something was lost in that transition. The direct connection between producer and processor. The understanding that what leaves our bodies does not simply disappear. The recognition that waste is not an end but a beginning, a resource waiting to be reclaimed. We are only now rediscovering what the nightmen knew, that human waste contains valuable nutrients, that those nutrients can be recovered and returned to the soil, that the linear system of modern sanitation, where waste travels one direction only, to treatment and then to dispersal, is not the only possible system. In laboratories around the world, researchers are developing technologies to extract nitrogen and phosphorus from human waste, to process it, sanitize it, transform it into fertilizer without the direct human contact that made the nightmen's work so dangerous. They are reinventing, with modern tools, what 18th century Edinburgh accomplished with buckets and carts and men willing to descend into darkness. The nightmen would recognize this work. They would understand it. They might even approve. Here is the final paradox of the nightmen. Despite their exclusion from respectable society, despite the contamination their profession imposed, they were among the highest paid laborers of their era. The law of supply and demand, which Adam Smith was articulating in those same Edinburgh streets, applied to unpleasant work as surely as to any other commodity. Few people were willing to do this job. Many people needed it done. The result was wages that exceeded those of skilled craftsmen, incomes that allowed nightmen to live comfortably, even if they could not live respectably. This created a strange inversion of social hierarchy. The nightman returning home at dawn, his clothes reeking, his hands stained, might own more property than the gentleman who wrinkled his nose at his passing. The profession that marked him as the lowest of the low paid him like one of the highest. Some observers found this scandalous. They complained that a man who touched excrement should not earn more than a man who made shoes or built furniture. They proposed regulations, wage controls, measures to correct this apparent injustice. But the market had its own logic, and the market said that essential work that no one else would do, commanded a premium. That the invisible economy beneath the visible one followed its own rule. The nightmen understood this better than the economists who studied them. They knew their worth, even if others refused to acknowledge it. They knew that without them, the philosophers would drown in their own waste. The 18th century was the age when the Europeans began questioning everything: authority, tradition, totem, the natural order that had governed society for 1,000 years. And perhaps the nightmen, in their dark work, contributed to this questioning, because the night soil trade revealed something uncomfortable about the structure of society. It revealed that the people at the bottom, the people who did the work no one else would do, were not less essential but more essential than those at the top. That a city could survive without its philosophers, but not without its nightmen. That the hierarchy of respect had no necessary connection to the hierarchy of importance. This realization, spreading slowly through the culture, contributed to the erosion of traditional authority. If a nightman was more necessary than a nobleman, why should the nobleman rule? If essential labor could come from anyone, why should birth determine station? The revolutions that followed, American and French and industrial, had many causes, but among them was this quiet recognition that the people who did the actual work of keeping civilization functioning deserved more than contempt. The nightmen did not lead this revolution. They did not write its manifestos or storm its barricade, but they lived its truth every night, descending into pits that gentlemen would not acknowledge, doing work that gentlemen could not do without. And so, we return to now, to you watching this, to the distance between your world and theirs. You flushed a toilet today. You did not think about where its contents went. You did not consider the infrastructure that carried your waste away, the treatment plants that processed it, the workers who maintained those systems. You took for granted what the nightmen made possible. This is not a criticism. This is the gift of progress, the luxury of not having to think about the systems that sustain us. But it is also a forgetting, a comfortable amnesia about the work that must still be done. The workers who still do it, the essential labor that makes civilization possible. Somewhere, tonight, workers are maintaining sewer lines, cleaning treatment plants, handling substances that you prefer not to think about. They are the inheritors of the nightmen, the descendants of that ancient profession, working in conditions that are safer and cleaner, but no more visible to the public eye. They deserve acknowledgement. They deserve respect. They deserve to be remembered, just as the nightmen of Edinburgh deserve to be remembered, because the foundations of our world are built on their work, because the cities we live in, the food we eat, the health we enjoy, all depend on people willing to handle what we will not handle. This is not ancient history. This is living history. This is the continuous thread that connects Edinburgh in 1775 to wherever you are sitting right now. The nightmen would want you to know. They would want you to understand. They would want their story told, not to glorify their suffering, but to remind you of a simple truth. Someone always has to do the work that no one wants to do. And those workers deserve more than invisibility. I have told you about darkness tonight, about pits and gases and men who risk their lives in places respectable society refused to see. But this is not truly a story about darkness. It is a story about light, about the light that emerges when we acknowledge what we usually ignore, about the illumination that comes from looking directly at the foundations of our world. The nightmen of Edinburgh did not ask to be remembered. They did their work, collected their wages, lived their lives. They raised families. They told jokes. They gathered in their own taverns and shared their own stories. They were complete human beings, not symbols, not metaphors, not lessons for the future. but we can learn from them anyway. We can learn that essential work creates dignity, even when society refuses to recognize it. We can learn that the invisible economy beneath the visible one follows its own rules, rewards its own workers, serves its own purposes. We can learn that the systems sustaining us are not magic, not automatic, but the product of human labor, often labor that we refuse to see. The next time you consider what keeps your world running, spare a thought for those who work in darkness, for those who handle what you will not handle, for those who, like the Nightmen, descend into places you will never go, so that you can live in the light. Their work continues. Their story continues. And now, perhaps, you will remember. This is Christopher, reminding you that every story we tell about those who came before is also a story about ourselves. What we choose to remember, what we choose to forget, what we choose to acknowledge, and what we prefer to leave buried in the dark. The Nightmen emerged from the pits each dawn. They washed the filth from their hands. They went home to their families. And they returned the next night because the work needed doing. History is not just kings and battles and great ideas. History is also buckets and ropes and men willing to descend into darkness. Remember them.